A veteran found a German shepherd frozen to the ground, and the note on his collar changed everything. At first, it looked like just a rescue in the snow. But this dog wasn't abandoned by accident. He was left behind with a secret someone would kill to protect. When the veteran takes him in, strange clues begin to surface, pointing to a world of corruption and betrayal far darker than anyone imagined. Each step closer to the truth brings danger crashing down, until it's not just about saving a dog's life, it's about survival, justice, and uncovering the hidden code behind the collar. What did that note really mean, and why are powerful men willing to destroy everything to keep it buried? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The wind howled through Ash Hollow like a freight train, whipping snow into white sheets that made the world disappear. Boone Kettering squinted through his truck's windshield, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he crept along the river road. The heater fought a losing battle against the February chill that seeped through every crack. 20 feet of visibility was a generous estimate. His headlights caught nothing but swirling snow. The rational part of his brain told him to turn back, but something kept him going. Maybe it was the old military training that wouldn't let him leave a sector unchecked. Or maybe it was just plain stubbornness. That's when he saw it, a dark shape against the white riverbank. Boone hit the brakes, his truck sliding slightly before coming to a stop. He leaned forward, squinting. There it was again, something large and dark, half buried in the snow. What in the world? He muttered, reaching for his heavy coat. The moment he opened his door, the wind nearly ripped it from his hands. The cold hit him like a physical blow. Boone trudged through knee-deep snow toward the riverbank. As he got closer, his heart dropped. A German shepherd lay there, partially frozen to the ice, its fur crusted with snow. But then, thank God, he saw the dog's sides moving with shallow breaths. The ice creaked ominously under his boots as he approached. The dog's eyes opened, revealing a sharp intelligence that reminded Boone of the K-9 units he'd worked with in the Army. No fear in those eyes, just a quiet dignity despite its desperate situation. "Easy there, boy," Boone said softly, inching closer. "I'm gonna help you out," the ice groaned. Boone's training screamed at him to back off. The river beneath could be deadly. But leaving the dog wasn't an option. He got down on his belly, spreading his weight, and crawled forward. The shepherd watched him, not struggling or whining. Its calm demeanor struck Boone as unusual for a dog in distress. This was no ordinary pet. "Almost there," Boone murmured. He reached out slowly, letting the dog catch his scent. The shepherd's tail thumped once against the ice. A good sign. The next few minutes were nerve-wracking. The ice kept making horrible cracking sounds as Boone worked to free the dog's frozen fur. His fingers went numb despite his gloves. Just as he freed the last patch, a sharp crack split the air. Time to move. Boone grabbed the dog's scruff and scrambled backward. The ice gave way behind them with a thunderous splash, sending up a spray of frigid water. They barely made it to solid ground before the section they'd been on collapsed completely into the dark river. Shepherd stood on shaky legs, shivering but alert. Now that they were safe, Boone could see the dog was lean but well-muscled, with the bearing of a trained working dog. "Come on, boy. Let's get you warmed up." Boone patted his leg, and to his surprise, the dog followed immediately, matching his pace perfectly despite its ordeal. The military precision in its movements confirmed Boone's suspicions about its training. Back at his garage, Boone cranked up the heat and grabbed some old blankets. The dog settled onto them without hesitation, accepting Boone's help as he toweled off the wet fur. That's when he noticed the metal tag on the collar. Y7, Boone read aloud, frowning. No address, no phone number, just those 3 characters. Something about that code tickled his memory, but he couldn't place it. He called the local vet, Doc Wilson, who agreed to come check the dog despite the weather. While they waited, Boone offered the shepherd some water and leftover sandwich meat, which it accepted with impeccable manners. "You're something special, aren't you?" Boone mused. The dog's eyes met his with an almost human understanding. Doc Wilson arrived bundled against the storm, her ancient Jeep caked with snow. She examined the dog thoroughly, finding no serious injuries from its icy ordeal. "Let's check for a microchip," she said, running the scanner over the dog's shoulders. The device beeped. "Here we go." Registered to an Elliot Brewer. Boone's eyebrows shot up. "The railroad inspector? The one who went missing?" Doc Wilson nodded grimly. 3 days ago. Police are still searching, but with this weather... She left the sentence unfinished. Boone looked at the German shepherd with new eyes. The dog met his gaze steadily, and Boone could have sworn there was purpose in that look. "I'll call the police," he said. "But until they find Brewer, this boy needs a name." "Can't just call him Dog." The shepherd's ears perked up. "How about Baron? You've got that noble bearing about you." The dog's tail wagged once. Decisively. After Doc Wilson left, Boone made the necessary calls to the police, carefully reporting everything about finding Baron and the mysterious tag. His military training kicked in. Preserve evidence, document everything, don't jump to conclusions. But that code, Y7, kept nagging at him. It wasn't random. Codes like that always meant something. He'd learned that the hard way in the service. Baron sat at attention, watching Boone make his calls. When Boone finished, the dog walked to the garage's front windows, staring intently toward the railroad yards that dominated the east side of Ash Hollow. There was something deliberate about the way he held himself, like a soldier on guard duty. "What are you trying to tell me, boy?" Boone asked softly. Baron turned to look at him, then back at the rail yards. The dog's focus was unshakable, and Boone felt his earlier worry transforming into something else, purpose. He hadn't felt that since leaving the army, but he recognized it now, the calm certainty that came with having a mission. "Okay, Baron," he said. "Message received. But we do this by the book. No compromising evidence, no rushing and half-cocked. Whatever happened to your owner, we're gonna figure it out." The German shepherd's posture relaxed slightly, as if satisfied that Boone understood. Outside, the blizzard continued to howl, but inside the garage, man and dog had found their common ground. 2 questions burned in Boone's mind. What did YY7 mean, and where was Elliot Brewer? Looking at Baron's steady gaze, Boone had a feeling the answers were connected, and that this extraordinary dog might be the key to finding them. The wind rattled the garage doors, but Baron didn't flinch. He maintained his watch on the rail yards, every inch the professional he'd been trained to be. Boone settled in beside him, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. Not with mystery hanging heavy in the air and a missing man's dog depending on him. But for the first time in a long while, Boone felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The morning sun cast long shadows across the brick facade of the Ash Hollow Sheriff's Department. As Boone pulled into the parking lot, Baron sitting alert in the passenger seat. The German shepherd's eyes tracked every movement, his posture reflecting years of professional training. Boone gathered the metal tag and documentation from the vet visit before leading Baron inside. The front desk deputy barely glanced up, waving them through to Sheriff Dake Rowland's office with practiced indifference. Sheriff Rowland sat behind his desk, his chair creaking as he leaned back. His uniform stretched tight across his midsection, badges gleaming under fluorescent lights. "Kettering," he drawled. "What brings you by?" Boone placed the tag on the desk. "Found this German shepherd yesterday, sir. He's registered to Elliot Brewer, the missing railroad inspector. The tag has some kind of code on it, YY7. Given Brewer's disappearance. Thought you should know." Rowland picked up the tag, turning it over with pudgy fingers. His expression remained unimpressed. "Rail yards use all kinds of numbers and letters. Probably just some internal tracking system. He tossed the tag back onto the desk. Let it go, Kettering. We've got enough on our plate without chasing random codes. Sir, with respect, Brewer's been missing for 3 days. This could be nothing, Roland cut him off. Look, I appreciate you bringing this in, but we'll handle the investigation. You focus on fixing cars. Leave the police work to us. His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Boone's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Yes, sir. Thank you for your time. He collected the tag and stood, Barron rising smoothly beside him. Outside, Boone sat in his truck, frustration building in his chest. Barron watched him with those knowing eyes, and something clicked in Boone's memory. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he was looking for. Laurel Finch answered on the 3rd ring. Boone Kettering? It's been, 2 years? 3, he corrected, remembering the article she'd written about his K9 unit commendation. Listen, I could use your help with something. Can we meet? An hour later, they sat in a corner booth at May's Diner. Barron settled at their feet. Laurel hadn't changed much, same practical clothes, same sharp eyes that missed nothing. She studied the tag while Boone explained everything. Sheriff Roland brushed you off? She frowned. That's not surprising, but it is interesting. How so? Because YY7 isn't meaningless rail jargon. She pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I've been working on a story about private shipping manifests. Y7 shows up in connection with Vosfreight's private sighting arrangements. Boone leaned forward. Vosfreight? As in Clarence Voss? The same. Local trucking king, major political donor, untouchable as they come. She turned the tablet to show him. His company has exclusive use of certain rail sightings. YY7 appears in their documentation, but I haven't been able to figure out exactly what it designates. Barron's ears perked up at the mention of YY7, his attention focusing intently on Laurel. Boone had seen that look before, in military dogs when they picked up on something significant. Brewer was a railroad inspector, Boone said slowly. If he noticed something irregular, he might have started asking questions he shouldn't have, Laurel finished. Look, I've got press credentials that let me access the rail yards. We could do a walkthrough tomorrow. See if we spot any containers with that code. Boone ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. The professional thing would be to hand everything over to proper authorities. But Barron's presence, his obvious connection to whatever was going on, made it personal. The dog clearly knew something, even if he couldn't say what. I know that look, Laurel said softly. You're thinking about protocol versus doing what's right. Sheriff made it clear to stay out of it, Boone admitted. But something about this doesn't sit right. Brewer's still missing, and Barron here ... double quote. He glanced down at the shepherd, who met his gaze with steady intelligence. He's more than just a lost dog. He's trying to tell us something, Laurel nodded. Sometimes the official channels aren't enough. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? We'll keep it casual. Just a reporter doing a standard story on rail yard operations. Boone looked at Barron again, remembering the way the dog had focused on the rail yards. Every instinct told him Brewer had stumbled onto something serious, serious enough to make him disappear. 10 o'clock, he agreed. But we need to be careful. If Voss is involved and Brewer did trip some wire he wasn't supposed to ... I know, Laurel said. I've been trying to get something solid on Voss for months. He's got friends in high places, and they protect their own. She gathered her things, then paused. Boone, thanks for not letting this go. Sometimes one person willing to ask questions is all it takes. After she left, Boone sat for a while, absent-mindedly scratching behind Barron's ears. The dog leaned into his touch, and Boone felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He'd gone from simply finding a lost dog to potentially uncovering something much darker. The smart play would be to back off, Let the proper authorities handle it. But as Barron looked up at him with those knowing eyes, Boone knew he couldn't walk away. Whatever Brewer had discovered, whatever Y7 meant, it had cost the inspector dearly. And now his dog, his highly trained, professional partner, was trying to finish what Brewer had started. "Okay, boy," Boone said quietly. "We'll figure this out. Together." The afternoon sun beat down on the rail yard as Boone and Laurel made their way between the rows of idle freight cars. Barron padded ahead, his nose working the ground with focused determination. The German shepherd's behavior had changed the moment they'd entered the yard, his casual alertness transforming into laser-sharp intensity. "He's definitely picked up something," Boone whispered to Laurel, who stayed close behind him with her camera ready. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as they moved carefully between the massive steel containers. Suddenly, Barron's head snapped up. His muscles tensed and he lurched forward, nearly yanking Boone's arm from its socket as he grabbed the leash tighter. "Whoa, easy boy," Boone muttered. But Barron was locked onto whatever scent had captured his attention. The dog led them beneath a line of stationary boxcars, forcing them to duck low. The space was tight and dark, making Boone's skin crawl with memories of close-quarters searches from his military days. Laurel followed silently, her breathing steady despite the tension. "There," she pointed ahead, her voice barely above a whisper. Through the forest of steel wheels and coupling mechanisms, they could see a container marked with stark black letters, YY7. Before they could move closer, the screech of metal on metal split the air. A boxcar was moving on the adjacent track, its massive bulk rolling toward them with gathering speed. Boone's heart jumped into his throat as he realized their position, trapped between the moving car and the stationary ones above them. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing Laurel's arm. They scrambled forward as the gap between the cars began to narrow. The sound of the braking boxcar was deafening now, the wheels throwing off sparks that rained down around them like deadly fireflies. Barron suddenly lunged forward, his powerful body slamming into Boone's legs. The impact sent both Boone and Laurel tumbling forward, just as the car's couplers crashed together behind them with a thunderous bang that shook the ground. They lay in the gravel, gasping for breath. "Barron just saved our lives," Laurel said shakily, pushing herself up to sitting. "That was no accident," Boone replied grimly, scanning the yard. Movement caught his eye, several men in work clothes melting away between the containers. "Someone knew we were here." After catching their breath and ensuring no one was watching, they made their way to the YY7 container. Barron stood guard, his ears pricked forward, while Boone examined the seal. "This lock's been tampered with," he muttered, pulling out a small pry bar he'd brought along. With Barron's keen senses alert for any approach, Boone worked the mechanism carefully until it gave way with a soft click. The heavy door creaked as they opened it just enough to peek inside. Laurel's camera clicked rapidly as they took in the contents. Stacked boxes filled the space, many marked with Veterans Affairs labels. But something was off about them. The printing wasn't quite right, the seals slightly wrong. "Medical prosthetics," Boone said, his voice tight with anger as he examined one box. "And VA prescription medications. All of it counterfeit." He picked up one of the boxes, showing Laurel the telltale signs of forgery he'd learned to spot during his service. "They're stealing from veterans, replacing real medical supplies with fakes and selling the genuine articles somewhere else." YY7 isn't just a code, Laurel realized, still documenting everything with her camera. "It's a pipeline for moving this stuff through the system without detection, and Brewer must have stumbled onto it," Boone added, carefully replacing the box. "No wonder they wanted him gone." He secured the container, making sure to leave no trace of their entry. "We can't take this to Roland." "Why not?" Laurel asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Because that near miss with the boxcar wasn't random. Someone's watching these containers." If we go to Roland, we'll just be tipping off whoever's behind this. Boone patted Barron's head, the dog still alertly scanning their surroundings. We need to be smart about this. Find out how deep this operation goes before we make any moves. They made their way carefully back through the yard, taking a different route than their entry. Barron stayed close, his body language making it clear he was still on high alert. The brush with death had confirmed what Boone had suspected. This was no wild goose chase. The YY7 mystery had teeth, and they just narrowly escaped them. The sound of distant train whistles echoed across the yard as they reached Boone's truck. The afternoon sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows between the containers that seemed to reach for them like grasping fingers. They'd survived their first close call, but Boone knew it wouldn't be their last. The evidence they'd discovered had transformed their investigation from a simple missing person case into something far more dangerous, a organized criminal operation preying on the very veterans Boone had once served alongside. As they drove away from the rail yard, Barron's eyes remained fixed on the container they'd discovered, as if memorizing its location. The dog's unwavering focus reminded Boone of his own military working dogs. When they locked onto something important, they never let it go. Now he understood why Barron had been so persistent about the rail yard. The dog wasn't just leading them to clues about his missing handler. He was trying to expose a criminal enterprise that had likely cost Brewer his life. The evening air hung heavy with anticipation as Boone parked his truck behind Huck's garage, well away from street lights. His longtime friend emerged from the shadows, holding up a small video camera. "Got the best one I could find on short notice," Huck said quietly, handing it over. "Night vision mode works decent too." Boone tested the camera's weight in his hands. "Thanks, Huck. I know this is asking a lot. Hey, what are friends for?" Huck clapped him on the shoulder. "Besides, after what we saw in that container, somebody's got to do something." They drove separately to the rail yard, taking different routes to avoid attention. Laurel was already waiting at their meeting spot, a small rise overlooking the loading area. She had her own camera ready. "I've got a clear view of the whole operation from up here," she whispered as they joined her. Barron sat alertly at Boone's side, ears pricked forward. "Remember," Boone said quietly, "we need clean footage of faces and the actual handoff. No sudden movements, no noise." He looked at Barron. "Stay," he commanded in a low voice. The German shepherd settled onto his haunches, watching intently. Huck positioned himself behind a stack of pallets with his camera, while Boone and Laurel took up positions on either side of the small hill. Barron remained perfectly still, occasionally testing the wind with his nose. The wait stretched for nearly 2 hours. Then Barron's ears twitched forward. Minutes later, they heard the low rumble of approaching vehicles. 2 black SUVs pulled up near the container marked YY7. The foreman Boone recognized from earlier emerged from the first vehicle. From the second stepped a tall figure that made Boone's blood run cold. "No," he breathed. "It can't be." But there was no mistaking Kurt Dannelly's distinctive stride. The man who'd fought beside Boone in the war, who'd shared rations in foxholes, who'd been best man at his wedding, was now head of security for Voss's criminal operation. Boone's hands trembled slightly on his camera, but he forced himself to keep filming. Personal feelings had to wait. They needed this evidence. The foreman handed over a thick envelope. Kurt checked its contents, then gave a sharp nod. Workers began loading boxes from the container into the SUVs. The whole operation took less than 15 minutes, conducted with military precision. As the vehicles pulled away, Boone sat back, feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. Beside him, Laurel touched his arm gently. "You knew him?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Boone's voice was rough. "He was my brother in everything but blood." They regrouped at Boone's garage, reviewing the footage on Laurel's laptop. The evidence was clear. Faces, license plates, the exchange of money. The loading of contraband medical supplies. This ties everything directly to Voss, Laurel said, freezing a frame showing Kurt's face. Your friend here, he's officially employed as Voss's head of security. That explains the professional setup. Boone said heavily. Kurt was Special Forces before he joined our K9 unit. He knows every counter-surveillance trick in the book. He watched Baron, who lay nearby watching them with intelligent eyes. The dog's behavior had been impeccable during the operation, maintaining absolute silence, responding to the subtlest hand signals. Baron's training ... double quotes Boone said slowly. The way he responds to nonverbal cues, his discipline under pressure. Brewer must have worked with him extensively during inspections. A dog like this would have been perfect for detecting anything suspicious without drawing attention. Laurel's expression grew grave. Which means when Brewer discovered what was happening, they had to move fast, Boone finished. You don't leave a trained military dog to freeze to death unless you're in a hurry. Brewer probably encoded what he found into Baron's tag, then tried to get him somewhere safe before ... double. He couldn't finish the sentence. Baron got up and pressed against Boone's leg, as if sensing his distress. Boone scratched behind the dog's ears, mind racing. The presence of his former brother-in-arms meant this operation was far more sophisticated than they imagined. Kurt's counter-surveillance expertise would make gathering more evidence extremely difficult. We need to move carefully from here, Laurel said, closing her laptop. These aren't just local criminals, they're professionals with military training. Boone nodded, still processing the betrayal of seeing Kurt involved. The man who'd once taken a bullet protecting him was now part of an operation stealing from veterans, the very people they'd sworn to serve. At least we have solid proof now, Huck said, trying to lift the mood. They can't wiggle out of this one. But Boone barely heard him, lost in memories of shared battles and brotherhood. The footage played again in his mind. Kurt's familiar figure emerging from the SUV, now working for the wrong side. It felt like losing a limb, a piece of himself torn away. Baron nudged his hand again, bringing him back to the present. The dog's steady presence reminded him why they were doing this, for Brewer, for the veterans being cheated, for justice that needed to be served regardless of personal cost. We should make copies of everything, he said finally. Store them in different locations. Kurt will know exactly how to make evidence disappear if he catches wind of what we have. They spent the next hour carefully, backing up the footage and distributing copies. No one spoke much. The weight of what they'd witnessed and what it meant for their investigation hung heavy in the air. The operation had grown far more dangerous, but they had their smoking gun. Now they just had to figure out how to use it without getting themselves killed in the process. The storm clouds gathered ominously over Ash Hollow as Boone pulled into his garage that morning. Something felt wrong. The door to his office hung slightly ajar, papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. His heart dropped when he saw Huck slumped in the corner, sporting a nasty bruise on his temple. Huck! Boone rushed to his friend's side, helping him sit up straighter. What happened? Huck winced, touching his swollen face gingerly. Two of Voss's guys jumped me when I opened up. Said to tell you to back off, or next time they wouldn't be so gentle. He tried to crack a smile but grimaced instead. Guess we really kicked the hornet's nest, huh? Before Boone could respond, his phone buzzed. It was Laurel, her voice tight with worry. They got to my editor too. Anonymous calls threatening to shut down the paper if we run anything about Voss. He's trying to bury this. Boone's jaw clenched. Are you okay? I'm fine, but Laurel's voice caught. Boone, they took Finn. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What? A black SUV grabbed him outside the high school 20 minutes ago. They called me to make sure you'd get the message. Baron was already at the door, hackles raised, sensing Boone's surge of fear and anger. Where? They're heading north on Route 12. Boone. Be careful, he was already moving. Barron leaping into the passenger seat of his truck as thunder rolled overhead. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as Boone gunned the engine, tires squealing on wet pavement. His nephew's face filled his mind. Finn, who looked up to him, who'd lost his father too young. The thought of him in danger because of Boone's investigation made his blood run cold. The storm intensified as Boone pushed his truck along Route 12, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Through the gray curtain of rain, he caught a glimpse of taillights ahead, a massive semi with Voss freight emblazoned on the trailer. His hands tightened on the wheel. The road curved ahead, leading to the old steel bridge spanning Carter's Gorge, 200 feet below. The river churned angry and swollen with storm runoff. The semi was slowing, taking the curve wide. Too wide. Boone's combat instinct screamed a warning just as the truck suddenly swerved, its trailer swinging deliberately toward his vehicle. He yanked the wheel hard, feeling his tires slip on the slick surface as the bigger vehicle tried to force him toward the guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. Sparks flew despite the rain. Through the passenger window, Boone caught a glimpse of Finn's terrified face in the semi's cab. The truck pushed harder, and Boone's right tires lifted momentarily off the pavement. Barron's muscles bunched. Before Boone could stop him, the German Shepherd launched himself through the narrow gap between the vehicles, somehow finding purchase on the semi's running board. The dog's sudden appearance startled the driver, causing him to jerk the wheel. The trailer's pressure let up for a crucial second. Boone seized his chance. He accelerated hard, scraping along the guardrail with a horrific shriek, but managing to pull alongside the cab. Barron was already there, having somehow worked his way up to the passenger door. The dog's teeth found the driver's arm just as Boone reached across. "Finn! Jump!" His nephew didn't hesitate. The boy practically dove through the open window into Boone's truck as the semi lurched wildly. Barron followed in a gravity-defying leap that would have seemed impossible if Boone hadn't witnessed it himself. Boone slammed on the brakes, letting the semi careen past. His truck spun once on the wet bridge before coming to rest against the guardrail, facing back the way they'd come. The Voss truck disappeared into the storm's gray veil. "Uncle Boone?" Finn's voice shook. The teenager was pale but unhurt, clinging to Barron like a lifeline. "I'm sorry, they grabbed me after school. Said they'd hurt Mom if I didn't. Boone pulled his nephew into a fierce hug. "Not your fault. You're safe now." But his mind was already racing. They'd crossed a line, using family as leverage. The message was crystal clear. Back down, or watch loved ones suffer. An hour later, Boone sat in Laurel's living room, having moved Finn to a safe location with trusted friends. Barron lay at his feet, alert as ever. Laurel paced, her reporter's notebook forgotten in her hand. "They're desperate," she said. "Going after family, that's a sign we're close to something big." Boone nodded grimly. "They thought threatening Finn would make me back down. They were wrong." He stood, determination hardening his features. "This ends now. No more hiding, no more careful distance. We push harder, faster. We expose everything." Laurel stopped pacing. "They'll come at us with everything they've got. Let them." Boone's voice was steel. "They targeted my family. Now they'll learn what that means." He looked down at Barron, seeing the same resolve in the dog's steady gaze. "We're not backing down. Not now, not ever." The storm raged on outside, but inside, a different kind of thunder was building. Boone had started this investigation seeking justice for a missing inspector. Now it was personal. Voss had made a critical mistake in threatening Finn. He'd created something far more dangerous than a curious veteran with a rescued dog. He'd created an enemy who would stop at nothing to bring him down. "Call your sources," Boone told Laurel. "Every contact you've got. We're done playing defense." He pulled out the evidence they'd gathered so far. Photos, Manifests, the video of the handoff. Time to show Voss what happens when he picks the wrong family to threaten. Baron's low growl of agreement seemed to echo through the room. The fight was fully in the open now, and Boone would make sure Voss regretted every threat, every attack, every attempt to silence the truth. But first, they had to make sure no one else would pay the price for their investigation. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the tire marks on the bridge where Finn's life had hung in the balance. But nothing could wash away Boone's resolve. The time for caution was over. Now, it was war. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the abandoned rail yard as Baron's behavior suddenly changed. The German shepherd's usual disciplined demeanor shifted to an anxious pacing, his nose working the air as he circled the tree line beyond the yard's perimeter. Boone watched the dog carefully, recognizing the change in his bearing from their years of canine work together. "Something's got him worked up," Boone said quietly to Laurel, who stood beside him documenting everything with her camera. "This isn't his normal alert behavior," Baron whined softly, padding back to Boone before returning to the trees, clearly wanting them to follow. The dog's training was evident in how he maintained a clear line of sight while leading them forward. "We should follow him," Laurel said, lowering her camera. "He's trying to show us something." They followed Baron into the wooded area, where fallen leaves crunched beneath their boots. The dog moved with purpose now, leading them deeper into the trees where the shadows grew darker and the air felt heavy with decay. About 50 yards in, Baron stopped. His posture went rigid as he stood guard over a patch of disturbed earth. The ground showed signs of recent digging, partially covered by scattered leaves and broken branches in a poor attempt at concealment. Boone's throat tightened. "This isn't good." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, but Laurel touched his arm. "Wait," she said softly. "We need to document everything exactly as we found it first. If what we suspect is true, we can't risk anyone tampering with the scene." She was right. Boone knew from his military training that preserving evidence was crucial. With trembling hands, Laurel began photographing the area while Boone carefully brushed away some of the covering debris. The shallow grave wasn't deep enough to fully hide its grim contents. As they cleared away more earth, they found what Baron had led them to: the body of Elliot Brewer, the missing railroad inspector. His remains were partially decomposed, but his clothes and badge were still identifiable. Baron sat beside the grave, his head lowered as if in mourning. The dog's connection to Brewer was evident in his protective stance, still faithful to his former handler even after death. "Look at this," Laurel said, voice shaking as she pointed to something partially buried near Brewer's body. A scorched leather pouch lay half hidden in the dirt. Boone carefully extracted it, finding a small memory card inside protected by the pouch's interior. "It's from a body camera," Boone said, recognizing the type from his service days. Brewer must have been wearing one that night. They rushed back to Laurel's car where she kept a laptop with a card reader. With hands trembling from both cold and dread, they inserted the memory card. The footage was dark but clear enough, showing Brewer's final moments as he discovered the YY7 shipments that fatal night. Camera captured Brewer documenting the contraband, speaking quietly into his radio about finding evidence of theft from VA supply lines. Then came the sound of footsteps approaching. The camera swung around, and there was Kurt Danley, weapon already drawn. "You shouldn't have dug so deep, Inspector." Kurt's voice was cold, unrecognizable from the brother in arms Boone had once known. The footage ended with a flash and a sharp crack. Boone felt physically ill. The truth he'd been chasing hit him like a physical blow. Kurt, his former brother in arms, the man he'd once trusted with his life, was Brewer's killer. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he'd received in combat. "We have to be smart about this," Laurel said, touching his arm gently. She could see the rage and pain warring on his face. "If we release this footage the wrong way, Kurt could disappear or worse. Destroy more evidence. We need to build an airtight case. Boone's fists clenched as he fought the urge to confront Kurt immediately. Every fiber of his being wanted to face the man who had betrayed not just their friendship, but everything they had once fought to protect. The veterans being cheated by this scheme, the honest inspector who died trying to expose it, they deserved justice. Not a reckless act of vengeance that might let the guilty escape punishment. You're right, he managed, through gritted teeth. We do this by the book. For Brewer. For everyone they've stolen from. Baron remained at the gravesite, maintaining his vigil. The loyal dog had led them to the truth, completing his handler's final mission. In death, Brewer had left them the evidence they needed, preserved by his faithful companion who had refused to abandon his post. Laurel began making copies of the footage, her journalist's training kicking in as she created multiple backups. We'll need to coordinate with federal authorities, she said. This goes beyond local jurisdiction now. We have proof of murder, corruption, and theft from federal supply lines. Boone nodded, his military discipline slowly reasserting itself over his emotions. The mission wasn't about personal vengeance. It was about justice. Baron had shown them the way, and now they had to honor that discovery by seeing it through properly. They spent the next hour carefully documenting everything about the gravesite, making sure they had multiple angles and clear photos of how they found it. Baron stayed close, as if ensuring they didn't miss anything important. The dog's presence was a constant reminder of Brewer's dedication. The inspector had died trying to expose the truth, and his loyal partner had helped finish what he started. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, they prepared to make the official calls that would set the investigation in motion. The evidence was secured, the documentation was thorough, and they had multiple copies of the damning footage safely stored in different locations. Boone took one last look at the grave where Baron still sat guard. The dog's steadfast loyalty was a sharp contrast to Kurt's betrayal. In that moment, Boone silently promised both Brewer and Baron that justice would be served, not through vengeance, but through the proper channels that would ensure everyone involved in this scheme would face consequences for their actions. The morning after finding Brewer's body, Boone sat at his kitchen table, his coffee growing cold as he spread out their evidence. Laurel stood nearby, pinning photos and documents to a makeshift investigation board. Baron lay alert at Boone's feet, his ears perking up at every sound from outside. We need to be smarter about this, Laurel said, stepping back to study their wall of evidence. Going head-to-head with Voss isn't working. We need a strategy that catches them all at once. Boone nodded, running his hand through his hair. You're right. We've been reactive, letting them dictate the moves. Time to change that. They spent the morning reorganizing their approach. Laurel made calls to her contacts, eventually connecting with state investigator Marcus Chun, whose reputation for integrity was well known throughout the region. After careful vetting, they arranged a secure meeting at a diner 2 towns over. I've been watching Voss for years, Chun said over coffee, his voice low but intense. But he's always been too careful, too protected. What you've gathered could be the break we need. They laid out their evidence, and Chun's eyes widened at the footage of Brewer's murder. This is solid, he said. But we need more. We need to catch them in the act with an unbroken chain of evidence. What about Deputy Sarah Reeves? Laurel suggested. She's never played along with Roland's corruption. She could be our inside connection. Chun nodded approvingly. I know Sarah. She's straight as they come. Good call. That afternoon, they met with Deputy Reeves in the back room of the local library. Her face grew stern as they shared their findings, particularly the footage of Brewer's murder. I always knew something was wrong, she said, gripping her coffee cup tightly. But this is worse than I imagined. Count me in. With their team assembled, they began implementing their plan. Boone and Chun worked together to place small GPS trackers on select containers marked with the YY7 code. They chose units that matched the pattern they'd identified in the shipping manifests. These trackers are state-issued, Chun explained, showing them the sophisticated devices. Every ping is time-stamped and automatically logged in our secure system. No one can claim we tampered with the data, Laurel discovered through her research that Voss was hosting his annual charity gala at his country lodge in 2 weeks. It's perfect, she said, spreading out the invitation she'd managed to obtain. He'll want everything to look flawless. All his important contacts will be there. And according to these shipping manifests, they've got 3 YY7 containers scheduled to move that night. He thinks he's untouchable, Boone added, studying the invitation. That's when people make mistakes. They spent days preparing. Boone worked intensively with Baron, drilling him on silent command signals that wouldn't alert any handlers during surveillance. The German Shepherd proved his worth again and again, learning to respond to the subtlest gestures. "Good boy," Boone whispered after another successful practice session. "We'll only get one shot at this. Has to be perfect." Deputy Reeves provided them with patrol schedules and security camera locations around the rail yard. Chun set up a secure channel for all their surveillance feeds to be transmitted directly to state servers, ensuring a clean chain of evidence. The tracker data started painting a clear picture. The YY7 containers' movements didn't match their official manifests, showing unauthorized stops and diversions that aligned perfectly with their suspicions. "Look at this pattern," Laurel said, pointing to her laptop screen where she'd mapped the discrepancies. Every time a container shows an unscheduled stop, it coincides with large medical supply shipments going missing from VA centers. They gathered in Boone's garage one evening, reviewing their plan one final time. The wall now displayed a detailed timeline of the gala night, with everyone's positions marked clearly. "Chun will have his team here and here," Deputy Reeves said, pointing to the map. "I'll be positioned to respond as soon as we get the signal. Baron and I will monitor the loading dock," Boone added. "The minute we confirm the transfer is happening, we move in." Laurel tapped her camera. "I'll be inside the gala with my press credentials. As soon as Voss makes his move to check on the shipment, I follow and document everything." The next few days were tense as they watched their tracker data stream in. Each ping confirmed their suspicions and strengthened their case. Chun's team documented every discrepancy, building an airtight paper trail. The night before the gala, Boone sat alone with Baron in his living room, checking their equipment one last time. The German Shepherd watched him with those intelligent eyes that had first caught his attention on that frozen riverbank. "Tomorrow we finish what your first handler started," Boone said softly, scratching behind Baron's ears. "We'll make it right, boy. For Brewer. For everyone they've hurt." The plan was set. The evidence was accumulating. Their team was in position. After months of being reactive, of watching Voss hurt people they cared about, they were finally ready to turn the tables. Tomorrow's gala would be more than just another charity event for Voss to showcase his false philanthropy. It would be the night his entire operation came crashing down. The trackers continued sending their steady stream of data, each ping another nail in Voss's coffin. The state's secure servers collected every piece of evidence, building an unbreakable chain of proof. All they needed now was to catch the final transfer in action, documenting the direct connection between Voss, the stolen medical supplies, and a YY7 operation. Baron lay at Boone's feet, alert but calm, ready for his part in tomorrow's operation. His training with the quiet commands had been perfect. He would be their silent partner in bringing down the organization that had killed his first handler. The pieces were in place. The evidence was secure. Tomorrow they would force daylight onto Voss's shadow operation, and justice would finally catch up to everyone involved. In the YY7 scheme, the first phase of their plan seemed to work perfectly. The tracking data flowed steadily into their secure servers, each ping confirming another unauthorized movement of YY7 containers. Boone and Laurel carefully matched each location ping against the official manifests, building an airtight case that showed clear patterns of deviation. "Look at this," Laurel said, pointing to her screen. "Every single unauthorized stop matches perfectly with reports of missing medical supplies. Chun, their state investigator contact, confirmed receipt of all their documentation. The evidence chain is solid," he assured them over a secure line. "We've got everything backed up and time-stamped." But their moment of triumph was short-lived. The rumble of approaching vehicles broke the afternoon quiet. Sheriff Rowland's cruiser led a convoy of deputies into the garage's parking lot, lights flashing. Barron's ears perked up, sensing trouble before the first pound on the door. "Search warrant." Rowland's voice boomed as he burst in, waving papers. His face wore a smug smile that made Boone's stomach turn. "You're conducting illegal surveillance operations, Kettering. We're seizing all your equipment." Deputies swarmed the garage, yanking hard drives and computers from their setups. Boone could only watch helplessly as months of careful work disappeared into evidence bags. Barron pressed against his leg, growling softly. "This is official state business," Boone protested, showing documentation from Chun. Rowland laughed. "State business? All I see is a discharged veteran conducting unauthorized spying. Your fancy paperwork won't help you now." They stripped the garage bare of anything electronic, leaving cables dangling and desks empty. Rowland's parting words hung in the air like a threat. "Consider this a warning, Kettering. Back off while you still can." Night fell early, winter darkness wrapping around the garage. Boone and Barron remained inside, trying to salvage what they could from the raid. The first whiff of smoke caught Barron's attention. His head snapped up, nose working the air. Seconds later, flames erupted along the walls. The fire spread with unnatural speed. This was no accident. Through the growing inferno, Boone caught a glimpse of a familiar figure through the window. Kurt Danley, his former brother-in-arms, holding an empty gas can. The heat intensified rapidly. Fuel tanks in the garage began to pop like cannon fire. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The main exit was already blocked by flames. "Barron heel," Boone commanded, falling back on their training. The German Shepherd stuck close as they moved toward the back of the garage. The rafters groaned overhead, timbers crackling as the fire ate through them. Boone remembered the breach they'd created in the back bay for emergencies. "Barron, forward," he commanded. The dog understood instantly, leading the way through the maze of burning equipment. The heat became unbearable. A support beam crashed down behind them, showering them with burning splinters. Boone could feel his clothes beginning to smolder. The Barron stayed focused, responding to each command with military precision. Guiding them through the inferno, they reached the hidden exit. Boone had to shoulder through the panel, the metal hot enough to sear through his jacket. They burst out into the snow, gasping in the clean, cold air as they staggered away from the building. From a safe distance, they watched the garage collapse in on itself. The flames devoured everything: tools, records, equipment, and every worldly possession Boone owned. Years of work reduced to ash in minutes. Barron pressed against him, both of them shivering as snow melted against their smoke-blackened clothes. The message was crystal clear. Voss's influence ran deep enough to command both law enforcement and hired killers. He could strike anywhere, anytime, and the system would look the other way. Their apparent victory had turned to ashes, literally and figuratively. As emergency vehicles began arriving, their sirens splitting the night, Boone held Barron close. They had underestimated how far Voss's protection reached, how thoroughly he had corrupted every level of local authority. The game had changed. Surviving now meant more than just gathering evidence. In the pre-dawn hours, Boone, Laurel, and Deputy Mike Torres huddled in the warm safety of Laurel's small office at the local newspaper. Their clothes still carried the acrid smell of smoke, but their determination remained unshaken. Baron lay alert by the door, his ears pricking at every sound. "The trackers are still active," Laurel said, studying her laptop screen. 3 signals moving along the predicted route. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "And I kept this safe, a backup drive with everything we collected before the fire." Deputy Torres nodded grimly. "State investigators are standing by. They've got clean channels ready for the evidence stream." Boone studied the rail yard schematics spread across Laurel's desk. His finger traced the line from the main track to Voss's private siding. A perfect trap. "The remote switch controls are our key. When that YY7 car reaches the junction during the gala, we redirect it right onto Voss's doorstep. I've got all the documentation ready to go public the moment arrests begin." Laurel added, tapping a thick folder. "Names, dates, times, bills of lading, everything connecting Voss to the medical supply theft ring." Boone knelt beside Baron, scratching behind the dog's ears as he gave quiet commands in German, the specialized signals they'd need if their quarry tried to flee on foot. The German shepherd's eyes never left his face, absorbing every word with intense focus. The rage that had burned in Boone's chest since finding Brewer's body had cooled into something harder, more focused. "This ends with justice, not revenge," he said firmly. "We do this right, by the book. No one else dies." Laurel reached over and squeezed his hand. "We've got one shot at this. Everything has to happen in perfect sequence. The rail switch, the state team's arrival, the evidence release. And we can't trust any local backup except Torres," Boone added, nodding to the deputy. "Voss owns too many people in town." They reviewed their positions one final time. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Voss's own private rail sighting to deliver irrefutable evidence of his crimes, right in the middle of his charity gala. The tracking signals blinked steadily on Laurel's screen, marking the approach of justice. The elegant strains of chamber music drifted across Voss's manicured lawn as guests in formal attire mingled beneath strings of twinkling lights. Clarence Voss himself stood at a podium, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd as he extolled his company's charitable works. Sheriff Rowland lounged nearby, looking smug in his dress uniform. The screech of metal on metal cut through the night. Heads turned as a massive shipping container, labeled YY7, rolled unexpectedly onto Voss's private siding. The container's doors groaned and burst open, spilling dozens of counterfeit prosthetic limbs and boxes of stolen VA medications directly at Voss's polished shoes. Chaos erupted as police sirens wailed, cutting through the night. State investigators swarmed in from multiple directions, badges glinting. Sheriff Rowland tried to bolt but was quickly surrounded and cuffed, his face red with fury and humiliation. Voss stood frozen, sputtering incoherently as officers approached him with handcuffs. "This is outrageous. I demand ... Voss began, but fell silent as Laurel's voice rang out, reading from documentation that tied every shipment directly to his operation. Through the confusion, Boone spotted Kurt breaking away, sprinting along the rail siding. "Baron, track!" he commanded, and they gave chase. Kurt leaped onto a slowly moving flat car, Boone and Baron close behind. The car swayed beneath their feet as they faced each other on the trembling metal. Kurt swung a heavy crowbar in desperate arcs, but Boone called out sharp canine commands that sent Baron weaving in practiced patterns, disrupting Kurt's rhythm. Thrown off balance, Kurt stumbled backward toward the edge of the car, his boots slipping dangerously close to the grinding wheels below. In that moment, Boone made his choice. Instead of letting his former friend fall, he lunged forward and grabbed Kurt's jacket, hauling him back from certain death. Deputy Hawkins caught up to them, and together they secured Kurt in handcuffs. In the days that followed, indictments fell like dominoes. The VA theft ring collapsed completely as evidence mounted and conspirators turned on each other. Voss's empire crumbled in the face of federal prosecution. Boone made Baron's adoption official, and together they began training with local search and rescue teams. One quiet morning, they visited Brewer's grave. Boone placed a hand on the cold stone. "We got them," he said softly. "And I promise you, we'll keep protecting those who can't fight back themselves." Later that evening, Boone and Laurel sat together on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in gentle colors. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining. "What happens now?" Laurel asked. Boone smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "We build something new," he said. "Something based on truth this time." Baron lay at their feet, his tail thumping contentedly against the wooden boards as the last rays of sun bathed them in golden light. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.